Humanity Has Declined is a dark comedy anime that takes place in a post-apocalyptic world where the human birth rate declines so much that there are only now a handful of humans left on Earth. Rapidly replacing the human population are a new life form called fairies. Fairies, despite their cute appearances, are beings that can create supernatural technology, which pretty much just means they can do whatever they want, they just have to feel motivated to do so. For example, they can kind of just multiply out of thin air and then in a matter of days construct as well as populate an entire city, one that includes their own set of laws, electricity, farms, religion, etc. It's kind of amazing. However, when it comes to the remaining humans on Earth, the fairies could really care less about them. Which really sucks when the humans are struggling with not dying of hunger. But damn it, they're really funny and cute, so, even though they are awful, you don't care because it's a comedy anime and it's meant to make you laugh. Except when it doesn't try to make you laugh. We'll get to that. Anyways, the main character of this series, Watashi, or as most people refer to her, Mediator, is a fairy mediator. Her job is to keep the peace between fairies and humans. She's one of the only people on Earth that seems to even know fairies exist, and is also one of the only people that knows how to talk to them into doing things sometimes. Sometimes. Most of the time they just do whatever they want to. Humanity Has Declined is comprised of mini arcs that generally revolve around Mediator just kind of dealing with whatever the fairies do. I know that sounds really vague, but it's really hard to describe what goes on in this show without spoiling everything. It's very weird. There's a lot of just surrealism involved, lots of surrealistic jokes and visual humor that I can't show you because I just spoiled everything. And what's the fun in that? Something that I think this anime really excels at is taking advantage of all the crazy things that the fairies do by using dry humor to address how absurd it is. And the reason why the show pulls it off so well is its main character. Mediator, despite her adorable appearance, is actually a very manipulative and cheeky person. She kind of has to be, considered how self-absorbed the fairies are. She tends to be very apathetic and or sarcastic towards nearly everything she comes across. There's some great jokes involving surreal imagery in the show, but when Mediator reacts to these things, it always just adds this little strawberry on the shortcake. I mean, she's a fairy mediator. Dealing with weird magical bullshit is just something that she has to do. She's used to it by now. Even when she gets spooked or surprised, there's always this ironic tone to her voice. It's very amusing. For example, without context, there's a scene where she finds a sentient headless chicken walking around in the woods and she's just mildly surprised. Just oh wow, that's not a thing that can happen. However, when the anime tries to branch off from being anything other than comedic, dark or not, the show suddenly becomes a bit of a drag. Now, I'm not saying that I dislike the serious moments of the show just because they're sad. That wouldn't be fair at all. The problem is that they don't expand much on Mediator's personality enough for me to care if something more serious happens to her. Despite having a grandfather and assistant that's basically her adopted little brother and a longtime childhood friend, when it comes to the other humans in the anime, she tends to kind of just tolerate everyone. The only exception to this seems to be her mute assistant, which makes sense because they share a very similar sense of humor. It was clear that she was actually a bit protective of him and actually cared about him like a big sister would. The thing is, he's not in every arc of the show, and while I'm not saying that he had to be, I really wish he was more involved in Mediator's life because Assistant seemed to be the only person Mediator showed any genuine concern for. Mediator's personality in general pretty much stays the same throughout the whole show, which could have worked. I'm not saying that I need characters with lots of depth in order to like them necessarily. I don't need them to have this big monumental change necessarily. But Mediator's apathetic disinterest in everything kind of got old after a while. Mediator always seemed so annoyed by everything around her that I in turn started to get annoyed by watching her get annoyed by everything. So, moving on, this anime was adapted from a light novel series, and that makes perfect sense to me. Why? Because the anime leaves a lot of questions unanswered. For the sake of the video, I tried to find some of those answers by doing some research on the light novel, but I only found a little bit of information about it in English, and one of those things happened to be a very brief summary of the light novel's ending, which was definitely not how the anime ended, and now I just have more questions than when I started watching the anime. So, I would recommend not doing that. With humanity has declined, there are just way too many things that leave you hanging and you're just left to wonder, why? What's that? Who's that? When did this happen? What's going on? Why do I care? It's all over the place, and it's kind of annoying, especially in regards to episodes 7 through 8. Oomph! Now, just to be clear, I know there are plenty of movies and shows that are directed in a way that's more so intended for you to just kind of interpret it however you see fit. But you see, this anime doesn't feel like that. While there does seem to be this underlying pessimistic, melancholic tone throughout the show, it just feels like they're leaving a lot of important details from the light novel out completely. Whether it was because the people making this were under a strict 13-episode time limit, or the light novel was just as bad so they intentionally left stuff out, I couldn't tell you. Either way, this show doesn't make a lot of sense. That being said, despite all my grievances with Mediator's character, I don't think this anime is awful. The characters and art style are fun, the music's weird and trippy, the opening and ending are amazingly catchy, and the voice acting is great.
こことこ多分コマの中です。なんだと何これ
Anyway, if you're thinking about giving this anime a try after everything that I said, here's my last bit of advice. If you're really bored and want to watch something weird and dark, then give it a try. If you don't like it after the first 2 episodes though, which I think are worth watching just on their own, just drop it. Without spoilers, I personally really liked the first 2 arcs as well as episode 9, but I don't much care for anything else. The other episodes are, for the most part, okay. A few got under my skin way more than I thought they would. Basically, half of the anime is weird and fun, but the other half of it is either or at its worst, ugh. At least, that's what I think of it. Anyways, thank you for watching, subscribe if you're new, and remember my friends, you don't have to watch it, but if you do, see if you like it, and I'll see you next time.